Thank you, Joe, and thank you everybody for coming out. In a moment, you're going to see myself and my good friend Alicia Kennedy. We're going to have an impromptu, unscripted conversation about tonight's topic, which is the adult improver. If you can see that we're both wearing yes and t-shirts proudly, we are both improvisers. That's how we got to know each other. I also have a friend, Ann Mulligan, here tonight, who's also another fellow improviser. But tonight's topic is not necessarily about improvisation. The conversation with Alicia and I are going to have is not scripted, so that may feel like an improvised conversation, but the topic tonight is the adult improver. And I made the distinction in the write-up that there is a difference between being a young person, say a 10, 11, 12-year-old learning to swim, as opposed to somebody my age. I'm 60. I'm not going to ask anybody else's age here, but there is a difference, I think, between the adult improver and someone who is very young. We come to the table with a whole different set of skills. Generally, I coach kids for a living, so generally I find them to be very energetic and less fearful of making mistakes, but they also don't have the life experience we have. So tonight, Alicia and I are going to talk for about 30 minutes, and I highly encourage everyone to take notes all through the evening, because when we're done talking, we're going to spend about 60 minutes and ask the audience to give us your version of what's happening in the adult improving world. So are you improving at something? Are you actively improving at something? I don't care about your age or what level you're at, but if you're here tonight and you're interested in still improving at something, then I'm really, really interested in what you have to say. So the meat of the time will be that middle section when you will get a chance to give us your version. Hopefully, Alicia and I will give a little bit of inspiration to spur you on. And then the final half hour or so, and this is where the notes come in, I'm hoping that you're going to be able to make a callback to something you heard somebody say tonight that connects with the way that you're learning. So, for example, if I'm learning to play the flute and I'm sharing with you what's working as an adult improver, and then maybe you're learning to speak a language, and you say, hey, Mike, I noticed when you said this about playing the flute, that's exactly what I'm experiencing learning this new language. So that's the gist of what's going to happen tonight. So at this point, Alicia, thank you very, very much for doing this.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. So I know, if you don't mind just briefly sharing what it is that you do. I know that you're an executive coach. Would you mind just filling us in a quick bit?
Sure, absolutely. I coach people in transition who are looking to, and I help them through job search strategies and interview skills to find and land a better job faster. And
nice.
So many improv skills and the curiosity of learning really play very strongly in the interview world. It's often a connection point, or at least helps the interviewee feel a lot more comfortable in an often uncomfortable situation.
Nice, nice. So why don't we start with improv, being that we were both adults when we first came to this, correct? You didn't do it as a kid?
Correct. So, I did not.
Yeah, I didn't do it either. I want to start on a positive note. Can you think of something about doing improv that once you got over that first hurdle, you kind of ran with it? Like, was there any special moment for you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So for me, improv, I always loved to dabble in lots of things, but improv was way out of my comfort zone just because it was very unscripted. And you were kind of flying without a net. And I remember vividly my very first improv experience was at the chess club in South Norwalk with the group where we met, and Anne was also involved in. And I remember it was just so fun, and I was so in awe of how funny everyone was in the group. And, I was able to participate a little bit in my own way, kind of getting my feet wet. And I remember that one of the last exercises that we did, we got in a circle and we had to, someone stepped into the circle, started singing a tune, and
yes,
else would step in and
right,
kind of keep adding and going off of each other. And I remember when it was kind of my turn to step in, I stepped in, totally froze. Could not remember the tune of my very favorite song. And it was okay. Like somebody else stepped in, nobody died, we all moved on, everybody didn't get, shunned from the group for all eternity. And it really taught me that, it's, yes, there aren't any bad answers, and you're always kind of building off of that. So I
exactly,
that gave me the courage to come back.
Perfect. Because I think in this whole adult learning process that failure, and I'm actually using the word failure or missing the mark, I look at it more like the cost of doing business. So if I'm going to improvise in front of a live audience, let's say, because I'm doing it a lot now lately, right? So let's say I'm performing, let's say 6 times a month. So that's 60 times plus over the year. That's a lot. Well, realistically, if I'm doing something 60 times at the performance level, right? So you're playing a guitar, and next thing you know, you're an adult improver, and now you're in a band. Great. You could even be in a garage band. But in your mind, if you're at the performance level and you're performing 60 times a year, realistically, you're not going to bring the house down 60 times. So you're going to have a certain percentage of bombs, or you're just going to miss the mark. So when you step into an improv circle and you freeze for a moment, well, you should congratulate yourself and put a little check mark down because you got one out of the way.
That's right.
You know what I mean? I think it's like doing the cost. It's a cost of doing business. It doesn't matter what it is you're trying to get better at. You're going to stumble. But instead of looking at it like, oh my goodness, people thought this of me or that of me, go back at home and look at it like an accountant and tell your accountant, okay, today I'm putting one in the debit column. That's fine, because over the course of the year, you're going to miss the mark a certain number of times.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. And I've heard Mel Robbins, a motivational speaker for kind of business entrepreneurs, really talk about you're not failing. You simply are a beginner. And that's part of the mindset too, allowing yourself those opportunities to learn and grow. And I've heard the example of, a child, when you're teaching a baby to learn, if they try to walk and they stumble or take a step forward and fall down, the whole family doesn't go, that's it. You're never going to walk. Just, give it up, like stop, whatever. There's always that opportunity to say, you know what, I'm just learning, and I'm putting my best foot forward and learning from each stumble along the way too.
Yeah, very good. And I think what you said there is the when you're doing it on your own, so the baby is not aware of the fact that they're trying to walk, right? They're not going through a checklist of things that they were taught. And if I recall from our last meetup when we were talking about the great teachers in our life, if you recall, and Don, who was a computer scientist, talked about having teachers that allowed him to tinker, to take the computer apart and just to mess around with things. So this summer, I learned how to swim. Now, I've always known how to swim, but I learned a little bit of technique from my brother-in-law about breathing and about like breathing every 3 strokes. So your head is alternating coming out of the water for breath. And I didn't want much more help. I had somebody else who said, because my body would tend to sink a little bit in the water, my legs especially. And when you're on top of the water, it's a lot easier to propel yourself. And somebody said to me, don't focus too much on your legs. Try to get your chest up in the air, and you'll be surprised. You'll be able to make progress. And then they started to want, or a very helpful, more advice. And I stopped them. I said, that's all I want for now. Because I think part of this magic recipe as an adult improver is you have to tinker. So I get in the pool. I don't care if anybody sees me at this point. That's another thing that improv helped a lot with. I just, I'm not, you're not going to see me at the Olympics. So what? But I found myself, Alicia, tinkering in the pool, alternating 1, 2, 3, then even strokes, etc. and I started making a lot of progress. So what are your thoughts on, self-exploration, so to speak?
Absolutely. I love the idea of tinkering. And I feel like when I think about the things that I have loved and enjoyed learning about, there are kind of levels. There's some things where tinkering is great, like that satisfies that need to try and that interest, and I feel completely fulfilled or excited to hit it at that level. And then there are other aspects of learning or topics or things that I want to move more along the mastery level. Never necessarily getting there, but maybe that's more the goal.
Yes.
And I think it's important to kind of tune into, yeah, I'm okay tinkering around in the pool. I don't need to be in the Olympics. I don't need to swim 24/7.
Yes.
Yet there may be something else that you're incredibly passionate about that you do want to dive that deeply into.
Right. But I do, in the pool, it's funny, I do want to improve. And I have improved, but I'm doing it with a combination of getting technical knowledge. Like I watched a couple of videos on YouTube, but being in the water, I need to wear earplugs and goggles. It's just the way that I need to do that to swim. Watching a video on YouTube, and there's so much information, and having my butt in the water are two totally different things, right? But just having enough technical knowledge and then doing it myself turned out to be a good recipe for swimming. But other disciplines, like you mentioned, where there are levels. So the chessboard behind me, the chess players have ratings, and you are what your rating says you are. The higher the rating, the stronger the player. So if you want to get better at chess, yeah, you can tinker on the board. There are definitely ways and it's beneficial to tinker on the board, but at some point, you also need to get down to the nuts and bolts of how to get to that next level. So it's a combination of things, I think,
And do you feel, Mike, that the level of tinkering in the pool and starting to get those types of skills versus chess, is there dramatically different, I don't know, joy or fulfillment to approaches?
Absolutely. Yes. Swimming is pure pleasure and fitness. I'm also doing it for fitness, so I have to force myself to get an aerobic workout sometimes. And very interesting thing happened playing chess. I did so much of it online, especially through COVID, that I was in this, I don't know if you can see my body, I'm at a slant now, and I have a mouse in my hand. And I've played hours and hours and hours of chess online, which did nothing but set me back. It did nothing to help me get better at chess because it was mindless. But what's interesting, Alicia, is I'm sitting like this and I noticed, I looked in the mirror and I had a little tilt. And I think there's even talk about what social media is doing to us in an evolutionary way. Like we're starting to grow little spurs. Like, I don't know if this is true or not, but people are talking about like kids, they're going to grow up and they're going to have, like we're going to have these little iPad holders on our backs. But anyway, I looked in the mirror and I noticed that, I had a little tilt. And I wasn't upright. My posture was really bad. The summer of swimming straightened me out to the point where some people asked if I had gotten taller. And I realized, well, what is that about? I'm doing a freestyle stroke and I'm doing a backstroke with full rotation of my rotocup, full rotation, which I didn't always have. There's a certain stiffness I felt. And I'm like, why? Well, because I never use it. And then I noticed with that freestyle that, it's like a cascade of positive things that come from that. So yes, I'm an adult. Yes, I'm trying to improve at swimming, but because of that, and I create this little band. So as a coach, this is part of my coaching philosophy. I'm curious to know hear what you think about this, that if you can see my finger, if this is your student's level, right? Way over that level, if you expose a student to this, and I'll relate this to swimming in a moment, if you try to get your student to do this, it's way too big a jump. It's way too big a jump. So what'll happen is that missing the mark that we talked about earlier is going to happen way too often. You have to have some victories. So if you're asking your student to play chess at an expert level when they're a C player, and don't worry about those levels, you're asking too much of the student. But if you create a band, and so if you can see my finger now, I just lowered it to the point where at this level, my student has to stretch to work at what I'm asking them to work at. The same thing happened in the pool. I'm watching other swimmers in the pool and I'm going, wow, I noticed what they're doing. That's really cool. They're actually not putting their feet on the ground at all. They're doing X amount of laps. I can't do that today because that's too wide of a gap. But what I can do is I can lower that gap for me. I can stretch myself to what I think is a reasonable amount of push, because you don't want to stagnate. And at the same time, you don't want to overextend. So part of my philosophy as a coach is create a healthy band for your student. Do you know what I mean? A healthy stretch, and then be consistent. Be consistent, because, you know, we've all read the books. We've all had great conversations like this, but at some point you either get into the literal water or the figurative water, and you have to put this stuff into motion.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a key strategy for when you're coaching someone. It reflects back on your swimming experience, because almost your experience in the water is almost like you're building a skill each time, or you're building a new aspect. And every time you return to the pool, you're kind of remembering or maybe warming up or practicing what you learned the previous time. And now you're ready to, just like you said to someone who was trying to be helpful, hey, I'm not ready to take on that new information yet. But maybe when you go to the pool a month from now, you'll feel more comfortable in that skill that you built a month ago, and you'll be ready to kind of add on.
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
And I think consistency is, and we're going to hear from everybody tonight, when you are making progress, or at least in my life, when I look back, it's been the consistency that was one of the key factors. And something for me that helped is passion. Like if there's something you're really into doing, then you don't even know that you're practicing sometimes. You know, you get how can you explain it? It's somebody who's really into basketball, you know.
Yeah, you get in the flow or the zone.
You're in the flow. You're out there all day shooting baskets. Or if you want to be an actor all day, you're reading scripts all day long. And somebody says to you, how can you do that? And they're like, what? They don't even, you know, like, so they're being consistent. But you don't have to force them to be consistent. You know, if you're trying to get good at something, if you read all the books, that's what they're going to say. You know, you got to do it. You make sure you stay and you don't quit. But that's not, those are words. It's not so easy to implement.
Yes, absolutely. And it reminds me a lot of James Clear's Atomic Habits book,
yes,
philosophy, where they took the biking team and they made all these tiny little 1% improvements. And over the course of time, it turned into something else. And that building effect again, or that stretching every time, they're kind of adding on to that. And I think the other thing that reminds me of is when he talks about, as you're kind of building those skills and returning back to the pool day after day or week after week, you are starting to become a swimmer in your mind. You're identifying as a swimmer and seeing other people who swim. And perhaps it is simply for health benefits and to learn something new, but now you are a person who swims.
Yeah, very good.
Day in, day out, and keeps that consistency going.
Yeah, very good. So I have some notes in front of me, and I've already mentioned in case anybody has come late. So Alicia and I are going to continue this conversation for a little bit. Please take notes, and especially when you hear everybody else come on and share their stories about this. But what I just wrote down now is, I'm just going to say, name yourself, because I read that book and I remember that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with calling yourself a swimmer, because it all automatically elevates yourself. In your own mind. I'm a swimmer. I'm at a pool, and I don't have to be, you know, the fastest swimmer in the world. But by calling yourself a swimmer, you've already made a big step. I read, or I read every day, The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday, and he said, small victories, giving yourself a small victory is one of the most underrated philosophical hacks. Like every day, I think that dovetails with, like in the Army, they say the first thing you do is you get up and you make your bed.
Yes.
Well, you don't have to be in the Army to do that. But if you think about it, it is a small victory, right? You get up and looking at a neat bed, you've already accomplished something before you've had a cup of coffee.
Yes.
And, I think that's part of the adult improving mix. You need small victories.
Absolutely.
So that's helpful. It's not just that check mark of when you bomb or when you miss. You're going to have a whole lot more victories in the ledger. So I think that's also an important aspect.
Absolutely. That consistency and that motivation to stay consistent.
Yes.
Is definitely key.
Yeah. Very cool. And I have, I struggle sometimes with the kids when I realize that I may not be coaching the kid, that I'm coaching the parent, which is a dynamic. I don't know, maybe there's another coach that's here tonight that experiences the same. So when you're coaching a young person, every now and then, because it's really a triangle that exists. It's the coach, the student, and the parent. If you're coaching an adult, it's one-on-one, but when there's a kid involved, is now a triangle because there's a parent usually paying for the lessons.
Yes.
Yeah. and
so they're an important part of that triangle.
Yeah. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, I firmly believe there's a difference between the way adults learn and how a lot of young people learn. And if I'm coaching a kid to become a competitive chess player, I have to make sure that I'm really not coaching the mom or the dad. That because the mom or the dad may have some vision of where they want the kid to be, but that's not the student. You see what I mean? So that's also, do you ever experience a disconnect with your adult, the people that you coach at the executive level? Like, do you know now when you're not on the same page?
Occasionally. And it's interesting because on occasion, I do get hired by a parent as sort of a graduation gift for the college student who maybe hasn't found a permanent position yet. And in general, they are can provide some good insights up front. Yet I have to draw a pretty clear line with them and let them know that indeed, I'll take that into consideration. It's very helpful information. And yet I'm going to be very focused on and hold the confidence of the person that I'm working with. Right.
Yeah. So you experience the same thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's so true.
And it also makes me think about, you're really tuning your attention to and tuning into the student and what they are responding to. I know when I'm coaching people, oftentimes if I'm trying to help them, for example, keep track of all their networking contacts while they're in job search mode, because it can get very confusing. I will tap into and talk to them about some of the habits or processes that they've done in their day job, previously in their work history, and see how we can adapt that to this new challenge that they're facing. How do I keep track of all these new people and remember who they are and who I have to call back and keep it in order? So you kind of look at who they are and how they operate on a day-to-day basis and look for those habits that are comfortable and familiar to them and that they've excelled at in the past, and try and adapt that to the new learning that they're trying to do around the task at hand.
Right. And specifically with the interview process, because I think this connects, because that is obviously an adult who's trying to get better at something.
Absolutely. Yes.
What are some of the biggest hurdles that I have an idea of what some of them are, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Yes. Well, it's very interesting. First of all, people come to me for one of two reasons, inevitably. Either they have sent out 100 of the exact same resume on Indeed and have no interviews to show for it. They're just, struggling and trying to figure out why they can't get past the ATS systems. Or they have a really, really important interview like Tuesday and they're panicking. They're in absolute panic mode. And oftentimes people who are in that situation haven't interviewed for a long time. Maybe they've been somewhere for a long time, at a, you know, in a position, and now they're moving on, or maybe they're returning to work after having a long hiatus to raise kids or travel or whatever. So it's all kind of a new world to them. So that is really scary. And I think most people's fear is almost like presenting. They're afraid that they're not going to be able to answer something. Like they're afraid they're going to draw a blank. They're going to be asked a question, and then they're going to do exactly what I did in that circle at improv when I was supposed to sing my favorite song.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
That's priceless. It was at Seinfeld, that old joke. He said that because public speaking was such a phobia. At one point, I think it was the number one. He goes, well, if you go to a funeral, people are more afraid to be the one giving the eulogy than being in the box. And I thought that was hysterical. And it's so funny that as a kid, I would not read in front of a class, to the point where in high school, I'd have a teacher say, well, you know, the oral presentation is the third of your grade. And I'd say, well, I'm starting with 2/3 of my grade then. That's how afraid I was of public speaking. And I became a teacher, and now I'm improvising in front of live audiences.
All the time.
But I still, and this is a meetup we did a meetup here on the imposter syndrome on another Wednesday night. And I still have that guy floating around in my head. There's actually twins. You know, I don't just have one imposter syndrome. I have two different voices. Yeah, I get double teamed. And you know, sometimes more prevalent than others. And, you know, it doesn't matter what appears on the outside. I'm always battling these two in the middle, which I think is an important topic to talk about tonight, where confidence, right? Confidence in doing anything is such a big part, a big ingredient in this recipe. And I always try to tell people, I get really interested when people are trying to do something. I've talked to Evanique recently about something she's doing. I know that, I think it's Anne, were you going to be doing some dancing later on next week? Yeah, this will come up later when everybody else participates. But I always want to hear what other people are doing, because if I can help with the confidence side, I will. But it's also a loop, Alicia. If I hear that you're doing something, especially if you say to me, oh, Mike, you know, I'm going to start doing X, Y, or Z, and I'm kind of like I'm a little nervous right now. It's out of my comfort zone. When you do that, what you're doing for me is you're saying, oh, my antenna goes up, because I have a friend who's attempting to do something, and you're admitting at the beginning, this is a little shaky. Well, then what that does for me is, I like that. There's a little bit of bravery, a little bit of courage there, because you're going to go out and attempt it. So what does that do for me? Let's say if there's something I want to do that I'm holding back, all it does is want me to do the thing more. And the more people that I interact with that are trying things at the adult level, it just builds this database for me of what works and what doesn't work. So today we're going to get to cram it in, which is a good thing, directly. But I think I think it's a good habit to have, to be involved with your friends' endeavors. Pay attention to what they're doing, not only to support them, but it is a loop. Because not only are you asking, hey, how'd it go last night, but that feedback you get from them can be very beneficial.
Yes. And I love that idea of really tapping into your friends' endeavors.
Yes.
And it's almost as if, you know, we are the 5 people we spend the most time with, right? So there's an element to finding like-minded people who are indeed adult learners. Regardless of the topic, they are just excited and curious about different things. And they're often willing to go somewhere unusual, or find an interesting event going on, or try something new together, or and
it's real. You know, it's when you, again, when it's somebody that you know personally, and they're telling you what they went through. It just, for me, there's glue there. When I read the books, and I've learned a lot. I read James
Mhm.
Clear book. There's so many excellent points there. And Carol Dweck, I think I'm saying her name right, is another one, talks a lot about the growth mindset. But
Oh, okay.
when I get it personal from somebody that
Mhm.
I know, the
Yes.
advice seems to come with a little bit of glue where it sticks more to me. Where
Mhm.
if I read the book, that's fine, but I find it harder to put into practice. But getting it, right from the person's mouth seems to help a great deal.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that helps,
Mhm.
especially improv, because I think you'll find this on a sports team. I think you'll find this um, with things like improv. Certainly, if you're playing music together, if you're acting together, and other people can chip in later on. There's a whole host of things, but if you're doing this in a group setting,
Mhm.
that's when you become brothers and sisters. Because as in an improv troupe, backstage, in the green room, which I love. We actually have a green room. It feels great. There's a couple of pros that I improvise with. I'm like, whoa, it blows me away.
Yes.
But
Uh-huh.
but you're part of a team. So when
Mhm.
the team struggles, as you do it as a musician, the band is going to struggle every now and then. And the band is also going to kill it, right? You're going to hit a home run some night. And when you do that in the group setting,
Mhm.
oh man, that's when you really, really connect with people. So I'm hoping some of our audience tonight will be improving in a group setting. Hey,
I
I'm playing in a band now, or et cetera.
mhm. I love that idea. And it's almost as if you are borrowing their confidence until you have enough of your own. And you're
Yes,
kind of riding
yes,
that wave upward.
absolutely. Well, I've got your back is probably as big as yes and in improv, right?
Yes.
I have your back. You start a scene and you say something that is seemingly completely ridiculous. Okay, it's out there. Now I got your back. You put it out there, it's yes and off we go. And same thing in a sports team. If
Mhm.
we're on a team together and
Mhm.
I make an error that has an influence on the game, it's kind of your job to pick me up too. If I'm consistently making errors, then it's on me to kind of figure out what it is that I'm doing wrong and improve my game. But the occasional error is going to happen. And when you have, I think it's all our responsibilities to pick each other up, which I think fits nicely to when I know some of you are learning something, or that I'm learning something and I'm struggling. I think we kind of have a responsibility to each other to say, hi, like what's going on lately with your game and or whatever it is you're doing, and try to help each other out.
Yes,
I think
absolutely. And I also think that even just the phrase, as I was thinking about this event this evening, even the phrase yes and is just such a wonderful premise for life. I'm finding it in my own situation. It's almost a way of approaching people or conversations or things or events or experiences and not seeing friction, like just seeing how it can happen or work out or be positive or
yeah.
move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that extremely helpful. It seems to eliminate a lot of stress and agitation in a
Oh,
lot of situations.
absolutely. Yeah. I don't do well in competitive situations now. I competed for so many years over the chessboard, and I
Mhm.
think we're built with a certain amount of wiring that has insulation. And playing competitive chess, and I worked on a stock exchange, yelling and screaming. I think that's how I lost my hair. but but
Did you pull it out?
yeah, yeah. But my wiring got frayed a little bit. There's just so much of that type of stress that you can deal with. And as a result, and now I'm rewiring it. Little by little, it's coming back. I may want to compete again someday
Mhm.
over the board, but these days I'm much more interested in the yes end, like as you just said, especially with my friends and people I really care about. I want legitimately to see them improve. Because what happened to me psychologically, and I mentioned this several times here in different meetups, I would spend most of my time sitting across from someone, nurturing my student at the
Mhm.
chessboard. So let's
Mhm.
say, I want to see you get better. I want to patch up every psychological hole. That's my job. All
Yes.
I'm here to do
Mhm.
is support you I'm still going to push you, but I'm going to patch you up and then send you out to play. Well, that's great. And then you go to sit down and play in a serious tournament, and the person on the other side of the board is trying to take my head off. Yeah. Whoa, that's like, whoa, I can't. And I did it for so many years. I can't do that anymore. So now I'm much happier and content with seeing the people around me improve at things. And I want to know what you think about this. This is hard. This is hard to, and I'm hoping other people in the audience can help out with this one. What if you know somebody in your life that really wants to do something as an adult? Okay. They want to get, there's something they always want to do, or they're doing it, but you know they're not giving it their all. Mm-hmm. At what point do you confront them about it? I have an awful time doing that, being direct with people, saying like, hey, you know, I've been listening for the last couple of years in these conversations. You should have been acting 2 or 3 years ago. How come you're not on that stage? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's almost calling them out for not doing something, but you got to be careful with that, because sometimes people really have reasons for not. So I don't know if I posed that question correctly, but sometimes I feel, I don't know. What do you think? It
definitely is a fine line, because in the end, it's kind of their life. And often we can ask, you know, are they saying these things looking for advice? Are they looking for support? Or do they just want to vent for a moment? Maybe they're struggling. And perhaps kind of maybe diving a little deeper and seeing the why behind, you know, what do they think is kind of holding them back in this particular situation. And if it truly is something they're interested in, I just heard Mel Robbins describe our lives are like a melting ice cube. And I just found that fascinating. Like, you know, so kind of what are we waiting for? Like there's lots of good things to go forward, but it's not, we can't capture that. We can't, you know, refreeze that the water that's puddled at the bottom.
Right. And that's exactly what I feel sometimes. I see the melting ice, and I see people that, like, you know, when you're a coach for a living, all you do is we have binoculars for potential, right? We have binoculars, and it actually says PON. It says potential across the binoculars. That's
and we plug up their psychological holes, as you said.
It's all we're looking for. And when we see it, and then you go, wow, like you would be so good at whatever, you fill in the blank, and they're not doing it. And sometimes I just want to go, you've got to go out there. And then I say, no, I got to stay in my lane, you know? So I get conflicted sometimes, but anyway.
You've got to want it. They're the ones, because they're the ones who have to put in the effort behind the scenes with the consistency and keep at it. So if, you know,
awesome. Alicia, I don't know where the time went, but thank you very, very much. I hope we've primed the audience. So Evanique, if you can take the spotlight, maybe keep it on me for a while. I felt pretty good when you had it on before. No, please don't. I don't want to give Joe nightmares. Thank you, Alicia.
You're very welcome.
Joe will be fine. Don't you worry.
Right. And Evanique, would you be kind enough to handle the exclamation points in chat?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. So everybody, what we're going to do now is, if you've been listening and hopefully taking notes from our conversation, if you have any experience as an adult improver, we'd like to hear your story. What are you doing? What is working for you? What's not working? And if the emphasis can be on what's working, that's preferable. But the floor is open. And even currently, if you're not improving at something, maybe you were in the past. And if you think anything you have to add to the conversation tonight, trust me, it will fit. And when we're done with this part of the meetup, at the end, we're going to try to tie into each other and see if you can specifically call back to something you heard from another participant. So if you'd like to share your thoughts about the adult improving process, just type exclamation in chat, and Evanique will give you a chance to talk. And we're not going to be commenting on the participants when they're done. We're just going to go from one to the next, and we'll save the comments for the back end. And we have a couple in there already. And Evanique, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. So we have Mona followed by Anne. Trying to see Anne, and followed by Nancy. So Mona, you're up first.
Thank you, Evanique. I wanted to thank Mike and Alicia for this nice discussion. It was so engaging. I just kind of wanted to get in right there. Dive in the pool, right? Swim with you. I wanted to say something because I've experienced lately in my life a lot of what I like to call like a renaissance, right? Like we're just like a desire to learn. And then I found myself at this time in my life that learning came from a different place than when I was a child. I'm learning because I want to, not because I have to. And I really want to. And that's another thing that touched me when I heard you talk with each other, like the passion, like how does that come about? And then how much does that help with the actual learning? Because it's not a chore anymore. Like when you do things out of passion, it's because like a river runs through you. You do it because you do it. You absolutely must. In many ways, it actually has saved my life, really, like just getting involved in a project where I was at the low point in my life and just something sparked my interest. And then I started learning about that. And it was just something completely new to me. And it was just like the only thing that I could do at that low point where I was. But that learning, the skill that I learned, pulled me out. And then like after that, not that necessarily I continued to learn in that direction, but everything opened for me. Like I started writing and I started painting and I started doing all these things I never knew I could. And not that I was doing it well, but I didn't mind doing it badly. And I did it out of joy, like a child. Like you were talking about how the children learn. And I found myself like thinking, gosh, this is like I'm a child again.
Wow.
And I loved it. And then I can't say that I've learned a whole lot. I think probably I did, but I just didn't keep track of it that way. Like I wasn't focused on getting somewhere. And I think that allowed me to play because I wasn't afraid to fail. I didn't have to be someone and I could just play. And I just enjoyed it so much. And I can't even begin to tell you how much that has changed my life. So that's what I wanted to say.
That's great.
Mona, I think we'll just stop the meetup right here. Yeah, I think you summed up so many. That was excellent. Yeah, I'm just kidding, of course. Yeah, that was great, Mona. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona. Up next, I have Anne followed by Nancy. And if anyone else has any questions or comments, you can, or I'm sorry, if anyone else wants to talk about being an adult improver, you can type exclamation point in chat, or you can raise your hand and do. Anne, you can go right ahead.
Mike, I wanted to springboard off your mention of public speaking. I had always been someone who's absolutely terrified of the idea of getting up in front of any kind of a group, even two people. It just turned me into a nervous wreck. I'd shake, my voice would get close. And I was in a corporate job 15 or so years ago, and I had to give presentations. I had no choice. And so, of course, they sent me off to an expensive public speaking course that was an intense weekend. It was horrible, and I learned nothing because the teacher was really not good. But then we had a Toastmasters group that opened up, and I thought, maybe I can do this. And so I went in and I gave my little icebreaker speech, and I was like this, but I just kept going and I kept practicing, and I found a comfort level to the point where people will say to me, well, you've never had a fear. You're so natural at this. I don't remember why I was afraid. And then about 5 years ago, I lost my brother, Rich. And I had been giving speeches at contests, humorous speeches.
Mm-hmm.
And when Rich died, I got up in a pulpit of a church that was jam-packed with people without a fear at all, because I knew what I was going to say. I didn't have anything written down. It was off the cuff, but I told a funny story about Rich. And his friends and the family, they all loved it. It wasn't one of those, oh, he was such a sweet person. Rich could be a jerk, but he was funny and he did funny things. And so I brought that out. And as I said, I had no fear at all anymore, because I had internalized the fact that I could get up there and, as you said, nobody was going to die. All I had to do was tell the story and get down, and it all worked out. And I've been able to do that ever since. And of course, that turned into improv, which is fun. And I'm not afraid of that anymore either, because, as you say, I did it enough where I'm an improver now and I can name it.
Mm-hmm.
You're muted.
Anne, would you mind sharing, you said that you're going to be taking a dance class next week?
Oh yeah, it's a line dance class.
Okay.
This is something that doesn't worry me at all, because I spent about a dozen years doing ballroom dancing. So learning steps is not a big deal for me. I'm pretty good at it, and my rhythm has gotten better over the years.
And when you were doing the ballroom dancing, was there an improvement
Of course,
process that you had particularly for yourself?
Yeah. There's a lot of things you learn with ballroom. One of them is, of course, the steps, but a lot of it's technique. I mean, you can learn all the steps and still look like a rock. You have to learn a frame. And one of the beauties of that is, you mentioned the physicality of swimming. With ballroom dancing, I went into it with a pronounced dowager's hump, for anybody who knows what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that having to stretch out and be in frame with my head up straightened my spine out. I had this one great teacher who was kind of a larcenous guy, but really terrific teacher, who would look at me and he'd say, "How tall are you?" And I'd say 5'6", and he'd look at me and say, "Be 5'8". And that would get my head up and stretch, and I'd stretch out and I'd stretch up. And it did wonders for my entire body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Anne. Up next, we have Nancy, followed by Rapali. Nancy, you're on mute. Nancy, you're still on mute.
Well, I've been trying to get that to happen for years.
Oh, oh, Nancy.
She's gonna get
I
so
give
mad
you
at me.
permission to say whatever you want to say right now.
Right now, I've got a sticky note over your face, Mike. Just
Thank you, Nick.
so as people were talking, I had a lot of things that were going through my head. Like you, Mike, when you were talking about kind of being in this zone, it reminded me of this old ancient book, which is, I don't know whether you can see it here. It's called The Sea Zone and Being a Peak Performer. And it was based on some research that was done. And it was talking about, talking about steps and being, when you're in the zone, you're challenged, but not too much. You're in control, but not to the point where you're bored. So there's this middle place where you feel committed, you feel confident, you feel in control, you're engaged, you're working to get to that next level. So that's a really good place to be. I've gone through phases where, like you, Mike and Anne, I started off with an extreme fear of public speaking. I'm an overachiever type. In college, I was so afraid to give a 5-minute speech in a public speaking class that I literally stood in front of the group for 5 minutes after saying one sentence, which was, I need a minute to collect my thoughts. And the thoughts never came. I had a stack of cards this thick for a 5-minute speech on child abuse. I went back to my seat and I could feel like a tear trickling down my face. I was exhausted. I had stayed up late to try to deliver this thing. And I was so filled with fear that I just froze. So 10 years later, I joined Toastmasters like Anne, got involved with them. I had 17 ums and ahs in a 5-minute speech, which I didn't even realize was possible to do, that you could say that frequently in only 5 minutes, but I did. 10 years after that, I spoke at the International Convention in front of over 300 people in Palm Desert, California. So that's an example where I kept chipping away at something and was able to move beyond it. Although naturally, I get scared sometimes if I'm in a group situation. I am not one of these super outgoing people who would just jump into any new situation. As I get older, I find one of the challenges is I have less energy, I have less focus. One point I started a business from nothing and had over 50 corporate clients in Manhattan, in Midtown, and did a lot of pretty high-end stuff. At this point in my life, I'm like a dilettante. I do a little of this, I do a little of that, and the challenge, I'm smart enough to know when I was younger, I was more naive and I just jump in and then it's keep on going, going and going. And then eventually you stick with it long enough, things happen. Now I know everything takes time and focus and attention to get really good at something. So that's the question, is where do I want to give that focused, and precious attention? So like, for example, I started playing pickleball. Now I'm fairly athletic. I talked to my friend. I said, let's try to get better. So we played a little bit and then we jumped into a tournament and we lost and then we got better and we started to win a little bit. Now I'm at and I've gotten to a certain level, and I know if I want to get above and beyond that, I'm going to have to play a lot more. I've been playing like maybe once a week. It's not going to cut it. So there's always the opportunity cost. Okay, if I'm going to channel my energy here, what am I giving up? What am I letting go of? What am I saying no to when I say yes and to something else? So that's always tough. I think as you get older too, you need to be willing, as someone said here, to be bad at something like art. Come from an artistic family. I think the genes are there, but never really focused on it and gave it my full attention. And part of me feels like I need a purpose. I need to sell my artwork. I need to raise money for a charity. There needs to be something above and beyond just that creative process. Now, part of me can argue and say, no, there's something to be said. If you're a creative type, there's something to be said for just creating. That brings joy. But that other part tugs at me, and there's a little bit of a pull. So the other point I want to add to is the power of people and doing something collectively as a group. Very few people are lone wolves who just go out there and do something relentlessly. They might be like a researcher, they're happy in the lab and they're just working away, a workaholic. Most people need the synergy, the accountability, the structure, the support, the input of other people around them. And I have to say, doing improv with a group has been joyful at times and really fun because we can celebrate together, we can scrub together, we know it's all okay, we're just having a good time. But one other final point that I'll say, having kind of worked in the field of behavioral change, having run programs to help people change health-related behaviors, you were to your point about when someone is not maybe doing what you think they need to do in order to move forward in an area. I think it's hard to do, but the best thing to do is to let go and realize that it's not your process to and you can't make people do things. I remember talking to someone I used to do in like the late 80s at Westchester County Medical Center, is doing cardiac like programs for people who had a heart attack. And, that ended up turning into being a business program that I did later on in my life. But, I did I remember talking to someone who had a tracheotomy, and, the person's smoking through the tracheotomy and saying, well, so how are you going to get me to quit? And my comment was, I'm not. I can't make anybody stop smoking. I said, if you have the desire to quit, I can support that within you. I'll be by your side, but that has to come from you. And one of the things that was very helpful was looking at the stages of readiness to quit. It was a model that they developed a long time ago, and it's still used for smoking and all kinds of things. But it had different levels. In this application, this guy, Prochaska, this researcher, identified 5 levels of readiness to stop. So if someone is not at a level 5 where they're ready to launch into another attempt to quit, there's nothing that you can do. And I'd see people like hacking away, literally on their knees, coughing. And I remember one woman in particular who smoked, single mom, her daughter smoked, she was alone a lot. There was a lot of needs that were being filled by smoking, and she just wasn't ready. And rather than, I used to get really frustrated, and the hard part was trying to release that and recognize that it's not my show, it's not my game, it's my role is just to be there when that person is ready. So the question is, what drives people to move them along that continuum of readiness? Where's the desire come from to do something and move forward? Sometimes, using the example of smoking cessation, maybe someone's grandchild said, Grandma, I don't want you to die, and that rings and resonates and ruminates in this person's head. You've got to find that, pull that out, and use that as kind of like, the horse that's got a carrot attached to their head. So they're like, that's going to move them forward. And they have to keep those reasons and benefits in the forefront of their mind. I find consistency is challenging. And I recently, I know I'm talking a lot, but consistency is key. I got this thing at the bookstore. It's got every day you can write down different habits, micro habits that you're looking to build to strengthen. But that is a challenge, to really practice consistency at really anything. And so I find as I get older, it's almost like it's not like my day is packed with, my kids are at a different point. I have free time. I have more independence than I've ever had in my life. But still, to kind of, it's hard to, I'm kind of doing a little of this, little of that type of thing. So the passion is there, but it's kind of spread wide. And, so I'm not sure what the driver is sometimes. I think it's to make a difference and feel like I'm contributing. That's one thing. And it's sharing something that I love with other people. That's part of it as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. That was
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And folks, again, we're all going to come back on at the end, and then we'll try to connect. Hopefully you're taking notes or you have good memories, and I've got, I don't know, like 4 pages here. I have some questions for everyone. So thank you, Nancy.
Yes, thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Mike. Up next, I have Rupali, and if anyone else has any questions, wants to share about being an adult improver, you can type exclamation point in chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Polly.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
Good to
by
see
the
you
way.
too. Great to see you, Mike.
Same here, Rupali.
Yeah, and Mike, I think now you should really stop the meetup because Nancy said everything I wanted to say.
That's a good,
Great minds.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to reiterate some of the things that Nancy said. As an adult learner, few things that help me are community and consistency. So people are different. I know that some people like to do things alone, but for me to stay motivated, I need others. I need people. And so recently I took up a healthy lifestyle for myself. And I've tried different things and never kind of stuck with that. But this time, the key difference was starting it with a group of people and, just consistently every single day, I haven't missed my activities or my focus hasn't changed. And the power of community is amazing because there's always somebody to cheer you, and it doesn't have to be the same person, but you can go through different people. And then it also allows you to see, what others are thinking, others are doing, others are struggling. They're similar to yours, and you can see that there's hope. So that's one thing. I recently attended a workshop by a psychiatrist, and he asked the group a question. He said, "When were you the happiest?" And most adults said they were happiest when they were children. And he said, "Why is that?" And the key element in that was that your brain is learning. You're going to school and you're learning new things. And for any brain to be happy, any person to be happy, learning a new skill is key. And I know somebody mentioned that just the act of learning, there's no reason. Yes, you want to find a purpose to sell the artwork or whatever, but you don't even need that. If you're just learning for the sake of learning to grow yourself, you're a happy person. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was you had asked, if you see somebody who needs a direction and you know what they need, how do you go about it? And what I've found is as a head of school, my role is to be there for students as well as for the adults who I work with parents and teachers. So that comes with my role. But I see with my friends, I'll often ask them, would you like help? Do you want my help? And if people say yes, then I go ahead and say, here's a suggestion. What would you like to do? And have this yes and throw it at them, let it come back to you. Have that, like theater, just have that back and forth with no judgment, really no judgment at all, that you're there in this together. And by doing that back and forth and using yes and really a lot, it has helped me to kind of be able to listen instead of just tell people what to do. So then I can take that feedback and then have them think about it and let them come to their own conclusions or solutions because they know their path better. But it kind of just helps clarify that path for them. So that's how I go about with friends. Thank you.
Rupali, would you mind if I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Because I know you work with you work with kids too. You work with young students. Do you find, or what are your thoughts about the adult learner as opposed to the young learner in terms of what we come to the table with? Do you have any general, I know it's a broad question, but do you have any initial thoughts about that?
So I would say, like, what comes to my mind is the growth mindset as opposed to having a fixed mindset. And you can see that with children as well as with adults. I see it more with adults because they have preconceived notions that, or they may have had an experience in their past lives where they've had that experience and it hasn't worked. And so, oh no, it never works, or they'll rely on that experience, or they'll rely on a conviction that they've made up in their mind and they don't want to change. I see this sometimes with children too, where they see the world in a certain perspective and that's how they want it to be. And so reframing their mindset is helpful. And one of the tricks that one of our teachers, our music director, he uses is, if somebody says, I cannot sing, he'll say, let's reframe it and say, I cannot sing yet. Eventually, and that word yet has so much power. And so giving children or adults that reframed statement and having them repeat that statement just allows them to say, oh, here is a possibility. I can probably do this. And somewhere I'd heard this, that, you need to say something 7 times before it sticks. And whether it's with children or with adults, I like to kind of present my thought in one way, then maybe using another method or another way to bring them to the table. Maybe I share some resources with them so they can go figure out for themselves. With children, I like to draw what their emotions are and what they're thinking and feeling, and then that drawing, so there are no words, they're just drawings, almost like stick figures. And then they eventually will say, oh, this, I think this is how I feel, or, and they can leave with a better state of mind.
Thank you, Rupali.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Rupali. Up next, I have Dak, Maxine, followed by Dak, followed by Katie, and then Nancy. Maxine.
I have very mixed feelings about this. You get to a certain point in your life where your feelings have changed, and your friends are all dead. And you have to now start your life over. And you have to, you have certain problems that you have to work out in order to do that. After all the people died, very difficult for past 4 years. And I found that the more people that died, I had a memory problem because it was so upsetting to have to deal with the fact that, okay, it's now time to go out and make more friends and work on your memory. Now, that is a difficult thing because who are you going to talk to yourself? So I joined a few groups to help in that situation. But I found that you cannot replace your old friends. You can take a million subjects and you can work on your memory. And my memory is getting a little better now, but not because of the people that I'm meeting. I thought, well, what kind of things should I take? So the first thing I thought was, I will take languages.
Mhm.
Now, I couldn't remember. I mean, I had a lot of languages, but that didn't do it. I could not take, I had to find something stupid to take so that I could release my mind. So I thought, well, I used to play Mahjong with my daughter's mother-in-law, who now lives in South Carolina. And I will refresh that. But it wasn't easy. I couldn't remember it at all. And the people that you meet when you play Mahjong are brutal. They are so brutal. And I thought, do I want to be with these people? And I thought, but I have to be with these people, because how can you be social without being brutal? With them brutal. Okay, so I found a way to deal with them, just as I found a way to deal. I have one friend who is not dead, who is impossible to speak to, because she has so many. You'll say, well, what did you have for dinner? And she'll say, chicken. I have it every night. And I say, oh, did you make it in a special way? I mean, you're trying to be social. And she'll say, no, I don't like it in a special way. I only like it baked every day, baked. I say, okay, well, can't you put something on it? No, I mean, everything is, and if you say, oh, well, you know, I found some nice thin little slices of chicken in the supermarket. Well, I don't like it that way. I only like chicken breast. I mean, so after a while, I spoke to her and I'd say, what are you having for dinner? And I have to speak to her about something. What can I talk to her about? She has a daughter who doesn't speak to her and hasn't spoken to her for years. And I'm not allowed to say, how's your daughter? And I can't say how my daughter is, because then she'll be upset because I spoke to my daughter and not she didn't speak to her daughter. And by the time I stopped speaking to her, I couldn't even remember my name. And I found after a while, the only way I can deal with these people is to just yes them to death. The ones who play Mahjong, they'll say, oh, well, that move wasn't right. That wasn't the right move. And I'll say, oh, you're probably right. And I don't argue with them, even though I know they're stupid and they're not playing right. But I can't argue with them. She tells me she eats chicken, and I say, oh, that's good. It's easy to make that way. That's nice. I absolutely agree with everyone, including my children, that yes, I agree with them. My daughter says that her son is quitting college to play in a jazz band all over the country. And I said, well, what is going to be your backup? And she said, he's going to be famous. I said, what? And I mean, I've been in that business for years and years. I know he's not going to be famous. I said, he needs something else. And she says, oh, no, he's going to be famous. I said, oh, you're probably right. Call me when the next concert is.
Oh, my goodness. Maxine, I don't mean to interrupt you, but are you familiar with the improv form called the Armando?
No.
The Armando is when you have somebody tell a story and the improvisers listen to it, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm including yourself here, so there's at least 5 of us. I would someday love to do an improv scene about what you just described, with your friends playing mahjong and having someone who just insists on having chicken the same way. And because I don't think everybody here knows what you did when you know, years ago as an actress and all the experience you have there. But that, you know, that's how they used to write the sketches. That you tell a story like that, and I would love to see people improvise that.
Well,
That was a great story. And Maxine, let me ask you a question. When you had to memorize scripts, how did you, if you had to memorize scripts, what was that like for you? If you don't mind sharing that with us.
You don't have to do that anymore.
No, I meant back in the day when you were, if you were studying for a play.
Well, then I didn't have a problem. I had a photographic memory.
Ah.
And now I have a problem. Okay.
Ah, okay.
But you don't have to memorize. But right now they give you cue cards. They give you all kind of things. And I had a cataract operation, so I can see those cue cards. But yes, but now I am, I have a 20/20 vision coming back. I don't know why it shouldn't be coming back, because it negates the cataract operation. Okay, so I just, and I don't know what to do. The eye doctor said, "Oh, you have 20/20 vision." I just have to yes him also. I go, "Well, thank you for doing that, but I really can't see." But I don't tell him that because there's nothing he can do about it. Yeah. And it's the world. I am humoring the world piece by piece by piece. And does it make me feel good? No, no, it doesn't make me feel good, but it helps me survive.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Thank you very much, Maxine.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Maxine. Up next, I have Zach, followed by Katie, followed by Nancy.
Hello. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that was a great presentation. Thank you, Mike and Alicia. Yeah, I wanted to stress, like, you know, having like the growth mindset is so important as an adult learner. And it's not just about, like, you know, having the growth mindset. It's sort of like, you know, seeing the world like almost like a child, like, you know, everything is a learning opportunity, and, you know, every experience that you go through can become a learning opportunity. And I can sort of, you know, give a more specific example is that, you know, like when we face sort of, you know, situations of conflict or any sort of like unusual situation that's, you know, not that's beyond our expectations, you know, we sort of often sort of look outside ourselves. We look at the situation itself or the other people that are involved. We might try to find fault in them or the situation outside of ourselves and so on. So, you know, you know, this is probably more of a personal opinion, and I think it's a good conflict resolution skill. You know, I think we should sort of self-critique first whenever we face these sorts of situations. We should look at ourselves, see, like, could I have done something differently there? Could I have, you know, done anything different so that this didn't happen? It's always like, you know, it's human to just go like point the finger or, you know, find something that seems obvious to us in that moment and so on. But I think, you know, if you know, whenever you're in conflict, if both people just sort of, you know, took a moment of pause and sort of reflected on what happened and, you know, like, Could things have been different? Did I do something, wrong, or did I make it? Was there an accident or something? I think that would sort of, not only would that help the situation, but I think that encourages the growth mindset and sort of, you wouldn't actually, hopefully, you wouldn't actually face this situation ever again, because now you know how to prevent this from happening. So, these are, I think, like, having that sort of self-critique, in kind of like built into you, so that, you are able to see every situation or anything that happens in your life as some sort of like, wait, pause for a moment. Could I have done something different here? I think that sort of enables the biggest amount of growth you can get from your experiences. It's easy to always look at the flaws of other things. I'm sure, like, it's never all your fault. It's never all on you, right? But the thing that you can control in those situations is you, and the thing you can change in most of those situations is you. So, if you take the step to self-critique, or think about like how you could have done something differently in any circumstance that you come across, that might not match your expectations, then I think that creates the most opportunity for growth. So, that's why I think it's really important to, have that sort of growth mindset as an adult learner, and sort of see your experience, see your life as kind of like a journey where you're just kind of learning. Like, even like school never finished. Life is just another form of schooling, where there isn't a teacher kind of like telling you what to do, or there aren't exams explicitly stated for you, but sort of like even these like difficult situations or these new things that you're having to learn, you can sort of, I guess you can treat them as exams. And the experiences that you're having could be your teachers. They could be teaching you something valuable. So yeah, that's
Thank you very much, Deck.
Thank you, Deck. Up next, I have Katie, Nancy, actually Katie, Julie, then Nancy. And the reason why I did that is because Julie hasn't spoken yet. So that's what we normally do here at 52 Living Ideas. We let people that haven't spoken speak first.
So I was responding to what Nancy, and then we're talking about improving others, because I'm dealing with the situation now. I'm not going to give all the details of it, but where people are focusing on weaknesses rather than strengths, it's really important to know, like, you have to understand how the person sees themselves. Because I see myself in terms of my strengths, and like this weakness is just something that's there, like something I just have to work and deal with it. But other people are it's kind of like when you're looking at, Nancy was talking about smoking cessation, which got me kind of in my mindset. Because it's like, if you're in that mindset of like, oh, that guy across the street smokes, and that lady across the street could lose 80 pounds, a lady down the street is really tall. Like, if you don't know whether that's how they see themselves. You know what I mean? Like, that might be just something small, but like, if you don't care about their strengths and you don't even know what their strengths are, I think really it's just really important to know how they see their strengths and weaknesses. What do they identify with? How do they see themselves? Because in this situation, I mean, I've never had people like approach me on weaknesses. So I'm like, ouch. Don't do that. Like, I'm used to going into a city where I don't know people, and people saying like, you're lucky. I never get people say that's all right. Okay, no worries. That's okay. And I was like, oh my gosh, that hurt to be approached on a weakness. So you really have to understand how they see themselves. Is that smoking just a little annoying habit to him? But maybe he looks at me and says, whatever it is, I don't know how he sees me, but it's really important to understand that.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Katie. Up next, I have Julie, followed by Nancy.
Hello.
Hey, Julie.
Several things came up for me. Tony Robbins, in his book Ultimate Power, talks about the myths that people have about success. And to me, all of it's about dispelling lies that we buy into or limits that we buy into young. But he says it's like a plane taking off for Hawaii. It doesn't take off and go straight to the destination. It actually goes over the straight line and then self-corrects and then goes back over the line and self-corrects. And then the last part was my life at this time in my 40s when I heard this. It certainly doesn't let fear of failure keep it on the runway. And that was what my life was. And, fears of perfectionism, fears of rejection, and also out of being out of touch with my own inner compass and what really moves me. So as far as like coaching people, inspiring them, telling them to pay attention to what moves their spirit when you're that lost is important. And then also, I found the supportive environment definitely did not include pressure for me. It was almost like I needed to be okay to screw up for me to take action at all. And so also that with that comes the willingness to make mistakes. And there is a benefit to being humiliated or embarrassed to a worst case scenario happening and finding out you don't die. And me, like many others, speaking, I was so afraid of speaking that I almost didn't graduate from high school because it was an oral exam. And I didn't speak at my grandfather's funeral because I was too self-conscious. And today it still is very much a big deal. And I did join Toastmasters, and to the point where I saw that I literally almost go in a blackout when I speak. And for me, one thing that's helped most is to pay attention to progress and not perfection. And from that place of progress, I can take a bigger step. And so for me, when I allow myself a pause when I'm speaking, that was huge progress. And also being willing to get up and do it again and finding out that I'm not the only one. And then that leads me to the next question. I always would like to have shortcuts. And this has come up many times over and over again, and I have not yet done it, but I would be interested to hear your opinion on this, which is if you're learning new information or you have a goal that if you keep it in your head, it's like 15% retention or 15% chance of success. But if you put it from head to on paper, it jumps to 65%. And then if you teach it to another, it jumps to like 95%. And I've heard this over and over again, yet still have not done it. I was wondering if any of you, and I've heard it from a lot of different places, that there's a power in getting it out of your head on paper. I'd just be curious if any of you had any experience with any of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're going to get more than one response when people start to do the tie-ins, Julie, on that particular, like the art or the action of implementation. Yeah, thank you, Julie. Is there anybody else? Ebony, would you like to share something before we start doing some tie-ins? Was there anything you had?
Well, Nancy was first, actually. So.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that you did an initial comment.
I did not. But I did tell Nancy she was after Julie, so I wanted her to give her the
go right ahead.
opportunity.
Sure, of course.
And then I'll go after Nancy.
Okay. Well, I just have, again, kind of getting different thoughts as people are speaking. When Maxine was talking, I was thinking of the importance of having people that can kind of witness our stories in life and how hard it must be when those people who have been trusted enough and close enough to our inner hearts that we've felt safe to be vulnerable, we've shared things about each other, when they are no longer a part of our lives and having lost them and how hard that must be. And it's not just once or twice, but at the older you get, the worse it gets in terms of having to suffer through the loss of people that we love. And yeah, I was just kind of left thinking there's no real easy solution to that, except have a lot of young friends as you get older and try to stay engaged. I think what happens too is we're talking about things like a growth mindset, and that brings up, neuroplasticity of the brain for me. And as we get older, we can get a little bit more rigid in our beliefs. That's why we want to kind of maybe have more control or tell people what they should do. And, we're wiser than we were. We know more, but again, we can't just kind of like push it out there on people because they're not going to like that a whole lot. But to try to be willing to be a beginner at something, whether it is learning a language or playing a new game or an old game, which feels new because your memory isn't the way that it used to be. So, I'm trying to learn Italian, and I've never been good at languages. I made it up to like 185 days, like in a row, like a micro habit. And then I got, missed a day or two. So now I think I've got 3 days and back to like 3, but I got to, start over like in this track record. But yeah, it's not easy because the brain just doesn't, my brain doesn't absorb things the way it used to be. And I have these lapses that happen periodically where I just can't think of something. But then on to what Dec was saying, talking about, could I have done something differently? Or to me, I always said, what can I learn from this? And trying to have a growth mindset. And I think that mindset enabled me to get into Harvard after I had spent 3 years preparing to apply and wanting to get in. I initially got rejected. But on my application, when I had prior to getting in, had asked them what I need to do to become a good, strong candidate in the counseling and consulting psychology program, I was told that I should ask them to send my application to the general admissions committee if I got rejected from the specialized department. And basically the only difference was I couldn't take one class. So on the application, I did that. And I had researched what I decided what I wanted. I was working 4 different jobs. I was volunteering. I'm doing a bunch of stuff, really making volunteering my priority to try to shape my experience in a direction that I felt would make me a stronger applicant. So I got the big rejection letter. And what did I ask myself? Well, what can I learn from this? And I decided that I probably would never, ever apply again. But if I did, I just wanted to have a sense of what would have made me a stronger candidate. So I called them up. I was able to get someone to sit down with me for a few minutes and review my application. In the meantime, I had gone through 3 books to prepare for the standardized test that I needed to take. And I could not get above an average score. That was an average score for Harvard. So it's, it was a higher level, but I knew there's no way I can increase my score. If they tell me that my score is too low, forget it. I can't, I've done everything that I can when it comes to that. Well, I sit down with the admissions, someone from the admissions department, they have my folder, they open it up and they review it and they say, well, I noticed here that you wanted to apply to the general admissions committee and that was never done. Would you like us to still do that? And I said, yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Well, a few weeks later, I get in. So that's how I got in. And it was doing exactly what Dec was talking about. Could I have done anything differently? What could I learn from this? And by going, I think that's something that a lot of us forget about, is that it's a process of just taking baby steps to listen, learn, improve over time. And that is a very powerful question. And then finally, what Julie was talking about, I thought there were some points that stood out for me of, pay attention to where your spirit moves you. And often we don't quiet the mind enough to really listen to what's in what stirs our soul, because we're so busy being, stimulated by this, that, and the other, hearing the bing of our phone, or just being kind of led by responding to, things that in the big scheme of things may not be all that significant or important. We don't go inward through, whether it's, meditation or prayer, or just quieting our minds to listen. And then finally, what Katie was talking about, I think, energy goes where attention, or where our attention goes, so that, what we make a priority in life, what we choose to focus on, we're going to get more of that, whatever that is. So if we're watching, spending 4 hours on Facebook, watching, silly videos for 4 hours, we're not going to be able to move forward maybe on something bigger that we may want in our lives. So, but my final comment is just the power of multiple minds, and the power of the group again. I find I like to learn, but I like to share what I learn. And to me, if I were to paint and I couldn't share it, or someone else couldn't appreciate it, or I was learning something and I couldn't share some of what I was learning about with other people, it loses its meaning for me. I want to be in connection with, other people and part of the bigger process. I think we become increasingly isolated, and that makes it very difficult to be able to move forward without that synergy, without the accountability, the support, the structure, the dialogue like we're doing here to move forward. And used to have mastermind groups as part of an entrepreneurial organization that I was a big part of, and that was very helpful for people. So they were built-in support and accountability. So
thank you, Nance.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Evanika, I think there was somebody else who was still.
It was Tamana.
Oh,
It was me.
and Maxine has her hand up as well.
Yes. I believe Tamana was first. She hasn't spoken yet. He or she hasn't spoken yet.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this terrific discussion. I've been listening, I've been taking notes, and I really appreciate everyone's words of wisdom. One thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to being an adult learner, and someone who, as an adult, you're trying to learn something or improve on something. I think one of the things that children, because they're younger, because they don't have the life experience or as much life experience as adults, they're sort of like cheerleaders for themselves and for their own friends as well. And I really like that about children, the innocence and the happiness that they feel when they do something good, and when their friends do something good. Everyone is cheering everybody, which I really love. And I think schools encourage that, teachers encourage that, coaches encourage that, which is really wonderful. One thing I wanted to raise regarding that, being as an adult, wanting to improve myself, unfortunately, I see that there's a lot of jealousy and envy, and maybe even competitive feelings between adults. I mean, children also do this as well. I think teenagers do this, but I feel like as we get older, because in our life we have certain things that we do in different stages of our life. Like in our 20s, we want to accomplish certain things. Society tells us we have to do X number of things in our 20s. In our 30s, the same thing. Maybe potentially get married, and maybe put a mortgage. Start having children, and in our 40s, raising those kids, and 50s and 60s. So I feel like because society has these types of norms, and I'm from the Asian culture, Indian subcontinent, so there's definitely a lot of societal pressure to get married by a certain age for boys and for girls. Also, settle down and have a career and finish all your traveling and whatever hobbies you want to do, or like all those things, they come at a certain point. And if you are sort of an outlier, which I personally am, people look at you strange, or maybe sometimes they envy you. And what I've noticed is that in my life, I've seen a lot of people who harbor a lot of jealousy and envy and competitiveness. And so I think one way that at least for me, one way that I handle this is I'm very selective about who I share my goals or dreams or hopes with. Now, I'm not saying I'm secretly a very successful person or multimillionaire or anything like that, or however you define success, but I do keep quiet, and I am very, like I said, I'm very selective, and I don't reveal too much about myself to others. And I have a very small circle of true friends and family members who I trust, who I know are my cheerleaders. I know not everyone is going to be my cheerleader. I wish it was like that. But from a young age, I realized not everybody is going to be in your corner, cheering for you, sticking up for you behind your back. So it's unfortunate, and I hate to bring the mood down perhaps a little bit, but I want to be realistic as well, that there's a lot of people who harbor some type of jealousy or envy or hateful competitiveness. And all of us, I think we need to be careful who we share our dreams and goals with. Now, that's not to say that you can't let yourself shine unapologetically. That I also do. And I think we should all do that. But, and even if it isn't well received initially, I think we should still let ourselves shine. But also, we want to feel like we can also inspire others to also shine, to also, if they see something that's great in us that they want to do, they're envious of, then maybe we can also be that kind of mentor or that kind of inspiration for other people to also, want to do that. So it goes both ways. It's unfortunate that we have to experience these types of things with jealousy and envy. And I think social media definitely harbors that a lot more, because people are always posting their best pictures and vacations and of travels and everything great, everything victorious. We want to post that. So I think we have to be kind of careful about who's actually on the receiving end. Are they happy? Are you going to receive? Is it going to be well received by quote unquote those friends, those people that in your circle, or do you have to be kind of careful who you share that with? So I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. I hope this is making sense. But I've also noticed that if I have a friend or a family member who refuses to tame their jealous ways, then it's been painful. But I've had to sever some ties also with some people that I've known for a very long time, and that's also quite sad. But once they actually show me who they're actually, how they actually are feeling towards me, I'm very, very selective. And like I said, I have a very small circle and very trusted circle. And I much rather have that than have a million followers on Facebook or social media who, at the end of the day, they may not be happy with how I'm living my life. They might be jealous of me. They might want to kind of aspire to do what I'm doing, but they also have a lot of jealousy that they can't do it themselves. So I just wanted to raise that. I think this has been a very inspirational and uplifting conversation, but the reality is that there are going to be a lot of people some people who may not receive your successes in a positive way. They might harbor some hate or some jealousy, and that's just the reality. We just have to deal with it in a positive way.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Tamana. Up next, I have Maxine, followed by Nancy.
Oh, there are a few people that I know who are in nursing homes now or living with their children because they need care. And so I decided, well, they probably need to be cheered also. So I call them and I talk to them about books that they've read, because I can't say, where are you going? They're not going anywhere. And if they forget what they're saying, that's okay, because I forget what I'm saying, and then we call each other back and say, this is what I meant to say. And but recently I thought, I have to discontinue this. I am going to not call anybody over 70 years of age, because they are all now about the same age, which is quite older than 70. And they're all going to die at the same time. And I do not want to be going to funeral every day. So what should I do? Should I continue with this crowd, or should I go toward the nasty, mean people? I mean, there is quite a decision that you have to make, and you're not sure. You may feel more comfortable with the ones that are going to die, but to sit and worry that you're going to wake up and another person will be dead, that is very discouraging. So, especially when I will say to one of my children, so and so died, and then they'll say, well, they were old. And I'm thinking, oh, what do you mean? Well, anyway, it's quite a thing to think about.
Thank you, Maxine.
Up next, we have Nancy.
I just wanted to make a brief comment about social media, and they've shown that the more time people spend on it, the worse they feel about themselves. So, that's a platform where people are building an image of themselves if they want, or showing certain pieces of their life. They're not talking about the bad stuff, how lonely they felt one day, or how they screwed something up. Typically it's more the vacation photos and things that kind of highlight and showcase things that they are excited about. But I think that's a big part of why people feel a sense of maybe inadequacy at times, and maybe feeling like, my life really sucks. Look at all these people that are having such a great time. We had a lot more, what I call more deeper, real relationships, I think, and for a lot of us that are a little bit older and grew up in a time when, you were either meeting face to face, or you're talking on a phone and you're having more extensive conversations. So it's not going to disappear. It's not going to go anywhere. But when you have people who, especially young people who don't have that history, like someone who's older, and the experiences of interfacing, with real people and community more often, it's easy to feel alone out there, and like your life really does suck, and that everyone else's life is so much better. And that's difficult.
Thank you.
Nancy. So, Mike, we are actually.
Yeah, perfect timing.
Yeah, we're actually
Yeah,
at
perfect
time.
timing. So there's. Say that, Alicia?
I was going to say, did Ebonique want
Yeah, Ebonique, did you have anything that you wanted to?
So I could do my takeaways for tonight. So I think when Alyssa was talking about tinkering in the beginning of the conversation, and I thought about that, and I was like, tinkering is a great way not only to figure out if there's something you want to do, but it's also a tool to use for curiosity, to find out about a topic, tinker with it, and figure out what you want to do. Because, for me, especially, like, I'm at that phase of my life where I'm trying to figure out like what I want to do, like my next move or something like that. I think too, that goes along with that is being willing to do hard things, because you know how it is when when you start out at the beginning and everything's like, you're excited and you're motivated. It's kind of like the New Year's resolution, and you're like excited and you're motivated until it gets hard. And then it gets hard. And then you're like, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to pursue this? I should just give up now. That's the part where you figure out, I think, whether that's when you have to go to your reasons why. Like, why do you want to do this thing? Whatever it is, why do you want to improve your life in this way? Like, what will it gain for you? What will it gain for your family? And I think that's where it gets important to figure out what your values are in life. And does this thing that you're doing to improve your life go along with your values? Because it could be the greatest thing. Like, we all see the trends, the diet trends, the improvement trends, the budget trends, all those things that don't last because you don't have the values. Like, and you don't know if this thing that you're doing aligns with your values, or are you doing it just because everybody else is doing it and they're having great success and you want that same thing? Is that the thing you really want? So I think there's a certain amount of evaluation when you're doing improvement. And finally, like, what does improvement mean for you? Like, create your own markers. I think it's important when you're participating in adult improvement is to create markers for yourself. Like where do I want to be? Somebody said when you're setting a goal, set the big goal and then work the steps back and figure out the small things that you need to do. But that's only something that you can decide. Now, can you get a coach? Of course. Can you? But how do you find a coach? You find a coach, someone that aligns with your values. So I think one of the things that by listening to everyone's participation tonight that I took away was, what are your values? How do you evaluate how do you evaluate if the improvement that you're doing aligns with your values, and setting up goal markers so that when it's hard and when it's like, and you're hitting that wall, because everybody hits that wall in self-improvement, I think. You hit that wall where you just don't want to go anymore. What's your why? And then you kick back in. And I think that's key. So those are my takeaways.
Yeah, that was great. I wouldn't mind commenting on something Tamana said about with jealousy. And I think what happens sometimes, this happened to me, so I can't say it's universal, but maybe you can give me your thoughts on it, that if we have a group of friends, or if you have a close friend or even family members, and they get used to you being or acting a certain way, and you share all of your moments together, and they're used to you showing up and eating a certain type of food. And let's say you go out and drink socially with these people. I'll just use drinking as an example. If you suddenly pull back from the group because you've decided to work out more or take care of yourself, I think as somebody who was here earlier who left was talking, it was Rupali, who was talking about changing her lifestyle. I didn't know if she was talking about physical fitness or health, but if you surround yourself with people who are used to you acting a certain way, and all of a sudden you say to them, it's Friday night after work, we're going to go socially have a drink, and you say, I can't. It creates a little bit of a friction sometimes. And I don't know if Tamana was exactly talking about that, but I've experienced it myself, where if I'm trying to help myself in a certain way and it changes my behavior that certain people are used to, it creates a little bit of friction. It's like, hey, Mike, what do you, how come you're not coming out to do something? It's like, well, I want to get up in the morning and I want to run. Well, if the people are going out to the bar, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing that, have at it. But if I tell some friends that are used to me coming out to have a social drink that I'm going home because I want to get up at 6 a.m. to go run, that can create a little bit of tension sometimes. I don't know if that's, I've had that happen before. Shrikant.
Hi there.
Welcome.
Hi, Shrikant.
Hi. I'm sorry, I'm coming in very, very late at the end.
We're just wrapping up. We had a great discussion.
Okay, so once you wrap up, if you can hand it over to me, I would like to ask people some questions.
Yeah, you're perfect timing. We just finished up. Unless was there anybody
You
who
have
wanted
finished
to?
up?
Yeah, it's 10 o'clock. We just finished up
Okay.
like a minute ago. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a topic of great interest to me. So I would love to hear very brief, what did you get from it? Or what's your strategy of improvement and what did you learn today? Just those two questions, less than 1 minute. Go ahead. Anybody who wants to answer, just go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Let's start with Katie, followed by Nancy. Katie.
Well, I think Mike started it off by saying that it's not just a steady improvement, like you're not just getting better and better and better. It's also kind of accepting that you're not going to hit every time. That was my big takeaway.
Thank you. Nancy.
I think my key word would be micro habits and remembering that drip by drip, you'll end up filling your cup with something, and time is dripping into your day. So how are you going to use that? So it's just trying to, flex the muscle, whether it's learning a language or staying connected with, socially with people just by checking in, or doing 10 minutes of exercise rather than an hour. It's just building in those micro habits and, that are marching in the direction that you want to go.
Wow, I love the idea of micro habits. Next up is going to be Evanique, Mike, and Julie. Evanique.
Yeah, so I was just sharing the idea of tinkering with something, like, being able to explore something new and trying it. And I think something Mike just said, and it was related to what Tamana said. It was talking about, surrounding yourself with people that support you, and Mike, I think you came in on that Mike was using the example of people who, like the example, I want to go run at 6 o'clock in the morning, so I'm not going to go out for drinks tonight. And, doing that, and then having some people give them grief. But, and something Rupali said too, when you surround yourself with like-minded people and people who are supporting you, you're more likely to achieve your goals, I think. And, people who have your back rather than people who, are used to seeing you one way, and they're interacting with you with that as that person instead of the person that you want to become. And when you tell them what you want to become, still they want to keep you where you are. So that's when you have to evaluate. And I think knowing your values, that goes along with knowing your values. So that's my takeaway.
Wonderful. Surrounding yourself with great people. I think that's huge. Thank you. Next up is Mike, followed by Julie. Mike.
Yeah, Shrikant, my observations are split. One half is as a presenter, the value of taking notes. Tonight, it happens every time I do this here. I have a mini textbook in front of me that I'll put together and review just from listening to everybody. So going forward, I learned so much about the value of taking notes. And specifically from the topic-based observation, Julie was talking about what happens when you're an adult improver and you want to get good at something. The thought comes in your mind and you're 10% the way there. You write it down on a piece of paper, you're 25% of the way there. You tie up your shoes and you take the first step and you're 50% of the way there. And she made an excellent presentation about implementation. At some point, you need to put the thought into action. And there were so many great responses, but that one in particular, the focus on actual implementation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. I'm a big fan of note taking, and what it does, how it transforms you, because it's like it's kind of like surrounding yourself with your own thoughts, but improved and edited and organized far better than what you can do on the fly, and providing that as a as your friends, if you will, to guide you for the wonderful and of course implementation. Next up is Julie. Maxine, I also want to hear from you. Okay, we had a very long record of improvement, so would love to hear from you. Go ahead, Julie. Sorry for the interruption.
I was just going to put that forth again, that if it's setting a goal or learning new information, 15% if it stays in your head, chance or retention, 65% if you write it down, and then 90% if you teach it to another. It just keep, being open to what the universe is bringing you in the moment, that keeps getting brought to me, and I still have not done it. But I've heard it so many different avenues, so I just had wondered if other people had heard why that would work and why, there's some, property about it. So I'm going to give it a try.
Wonderful.
And I took notes too. Bye.
Thank you, Julie. Maxine, what about you?
I found that you have to keep reviewing your feelings because they are constantly changing. And well, I ran into different things at different ages, and things that were important to me years ago, they don't qualify for me to even look at them nowadays. I am working on, and I was working on before, memory. I wanted to remember, but the more upset I get reviewing, the worse my memory. So I am not worrying about memory anymore. I am just dealing with people. The older you get, your friends are all dead. Now, how are you going to deal with the rest of your life with all these dead friends? Okay, of course you'll lose your memory. Who are you going to talk to? Yourself? So it is time to make new friends, but you don't want to make new friends because they have nothing in common with you. But I did join a Mahjong group with a bunch of younger women. And I explained to them that they were all very nasty. Well, I still had to remain true to these nasty women and try to turn them around. So I decided that I have to agree with everything they say, even though it's wrong. And I know it's wrong, but that will help me think. So I'll deal with nasty. I will pretend they are not nasty. And that's how I go through life with the other people. I was telling them, I have this one friend that's impossible. She is absolutely impossible. You can't talk to her. She has very strong opinions on everything, and they're not always correct. So I humor her, and no matter how nasty she is, I was telling them, I'll say to her, what are you having for dinner? And she'll say chicken. And I'll say, oh, I have a new I only like it when it's plain. I only like it when it's plain. I said, okay, well, you can buy plain ones in the Acme. And she'll say, oh, no, I'd much rather go to ShopRite. And so I humor her and I say, good idea. Everything is a good idea. Idea, yes.
Thank you, Maxine. That's, basically, facing up, even if it is distasteful, facing that up. Alicia, would you like to add anything?
We've just had such a rich discussion all evening, and a million things were great connections for me. And just kind of circling back to this idea of that curiosity and love of learning really starts with our values and what makes us happy, either today or maybe even reflecting back on our past. and what made us happy in different stages of our lives. And then when you kind of get to that sort of why you want to try this new beginning, that often helps us keep that habit going. So I love that idea, and the idea that it's okay to be a beginner. It's okay to not do it perfectly. It's okay to put different levels of emphasis on different parts of your life, and just always be open and excited to keep learning.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, folks. And Mike, thank you for letting me come in and talk about this, because this is a topic of, is very close to my heart. Over to you. You're on mute, though.
Mute.
Yeah, we're going to close it up. Shrikant, I'd love to ask you, you're nonstop improving in your life. Do you have any general thoughts about what gets you up in the morning, and how do you keep the schedule that you do? Because the reason I'm asking that specific question is that was a problem that we all have sometimes, is what gets us up to actually do what it is that we're improving at. So what gets you up in the morning and has you working at 10 o'clock at night?
No, my problem is, it's like, it's the opposite. I'm just very excited about a lot of things. And it's a question of, how do you manage that?
Huh.
So that you're not just doing kind of small improvements, but you're doing something that counts. And the biggest thing that I've learned is that you have to face your weaknesses. You have to face your fears. You have to go through, you have to be prepared to take on your fears, the thing you fear most. And it's the idea of rebirth, it is the idea of kind of dying, basically. It is dying continuously, of saying that whatever you had was not good enough. Because if you thought it was good enough, you're just going to be that. You're not going to improve significantly. So most of the improvement comes from saying that, oh, this is just, basically by saying no to what you have achieved, for better or for worse. A lot of it is for worse, in the sense that there are a lot of things we carry in us through habits. So, I mean, the core idea is the same idea of, if you want to put it, I've been studying the, Gospel of John. It is the idea of the cross, that you're carrying the old man with you. You're carrying everything that you have done, your thoughts, your emotions, your habits, the people around you, your house, your social surroundings, your wealth, everything you're carrying with you. And with that, because you're carrying and because you're in love with it, you're basically stuck there. That's the old man you're carrying. You have to be willing to say no to it. And that is a new beginning. That is rebirth. That is renaissance. That is, going back to the basics, relentlessly going back to the Tao, and not being satisfied with the 10,000 things that we carry with us. So, but that means that you have to be willing to bleed for it.
Right.
You're at the bleeding edge. You are at the edge of kind of order and chaos. Not be satisfied with order, but always stepping into the chaos of whatever it is that you don't know, whatever it is that you're weak at, even on the best of your works. I mean, that's what writing is all about, right? I mean, connecting it to what everybody else has said. It is an issue of reviewing your emotions, as Maxine is saying. It is saying, don't take all of those things for granted. It's not just reviewing your emotions, reviewing your thoughts, reviewing the people in your life, reviewing what you do every day, but looking at it very objectively. It is all about creating micro habits. So this is a micro habit. It's really a moment where you say, okay, I am going to look at this afresh to see what new things. So that is the most powerful micro habit, because it happens in a fraction of a second. It happens in a moment. It is always in the present. So it is the idea of present. It is all about surrounding yourself with people, not just people who support you, but people who challenge you, people who have a deep commonality with you, who are trying to improve, but who are very different from each other. So you will see things which you will never see before, you have not seen before. So I really appreciate friends who have that deep commonality. So we have the trust and common base, but we also have massive differences. So I can improve a little bit because I can see them operating in a different way. So, and it's all about implementation. It's all about putting your skin in the game, and taking the risk. This is what writing is about. This is what note taking is about. You're putting the thoughts which are sacrosanct to you when you're thinking out there on the paper for you to see, for anybody else to see. It is all about speaking out. It's all about conversation, where you make your ideas, throw them out there, and then listen. It's like breathing in and breathing out. But there is a lot that happens when you do that. So that would be my answer. Maxine.
I just bought a car, and everyone said to me, well, how long are you going to be driving? I said, I want to be able to understand all the little buttons in this car. That will help my memory. And even if I never drive it, you can look at it. And I am not going to drive to New York to do work. No, I'm not going to drive at night because I can't see at night. But I am going to know what all those little buttons are. And when I ask my friends or my family, what does this button mean? And they say, well, look in the directory. I just look at them and I say, don't you worry, I'll figure it out. I go past the bank, I know the teller, I go in there and I say, does your wife have this car? And he says, yes. I said, well, what does this little button mean? So you have to find your way around what to do. You have to constantly, I'm not going, I said, what is this for? They said the radio, but you can't listen to it while you're driving. I said, but I want to know what the button means. I may never listen to it. Okay. But I think it's good to give you new ways to think.
Thank you. Thank you, Maxine. Great point. What happens is that, I would just want to use it as a example of basically you do something which is large enough, which is going to challenge you, which is going to extend you. And what car would be for Maxine would be something else for us, which is very different, something that will truly kind of put yourself out of our comfort zone and make you stretch. And that willingness to face that discomfort within yourself, within your concepts, your mind, within your heart, within your social circle. It's you have to be willing to kind of take on, different people and to deal with them in a different way. So thank you, Maxine. All right, Mike, go ahead.
I was thinking as you were talking, I was listening. I remember Jordan Peterson at Logos at Ephesus. He said, he posited something. He said, the world is languishing to the degree that you are not all that you can be. And I thought about that, and I'm connecting it to what you just said. So here's a question for the group, and then we'll call it a night. If you're aware of that you surround yourself with people that challenge you, is it almost a moral obligation to push yourself once you develop that mindset? In other words, we all have the means, whether it be financial or just general comfort, to sit back and say, I've done enough with my life. I'm 60 years old. I can sit back and help people out here or there. But to me, Shrikant, it almost feels like I have a moral obligation to push myself to a different level every day. And I'm using the word moral literally, like it is an obligation that's in front of me, and to also share that with my friends that I want to see improve.
I'll give a quick answer if you want.
Yeah, or if anybody else, yeah, please,
Yeah.
please go right ahead.
So no, let's go with Alicia first. Alicia, go ahead.
Yeah, that definitely makes me think about this idea that you always are striving to you have that obligation. Like when I think about one of the things that helps me stick to a habit or try to learn something new is the accountability. And it's not just accountability for someone making sure that I'm doing it. Like I feel accountable or responsible to show up for the other person. And so this idea of like taking it to another level, I'd walk through fire for other people, and sometimes I wouldn't do that for myself. And yet, like, that's a great way for me to have that perspective by thinking about serving or helping someone else.
Thank you. Wait a minute. Nancy, go ahead. You had something?
Well, I didn't, but
Oh, okay. I sorry, I saw your light up. But
I think that, I think that that's a very good point, Alicia. I can relate to that. In high school, I ran track and I was a very fast runner, but I always ran faster when I had the baton and I was passing it off to someone else. And that really, I'm part of something larger than myself. And that pool, that bigger pool that we swim in can be a spiritual pool, it could be a friend group or whatever, but I think it's about, again, finding meaning, and purpose for what we're doing, and something larger than ourselves. If we have that, it helps.
So my approach to it is far more simpler. I think it's the difference between life and death. I see people who are kind of just satisfied with stuff. They're basically saying, okay, I'm done living. I'm now just waiting to die. And I will just use up whatever I have and I will just die. So it's like, it's a choice. I mean, living consists of building things, of saying, okay, what are you going to grow? It's like a living plant. If a plant decides, okay, I'm not going to do anything, it will just decay and die. And that's what happens to people. It's just that, we build things up quite a bit. So it takes time. So it's like they are kind of slowly dying. You don't see them kind of drop dead immediately, but that's what they have decided to do. So they're trying to drop dead all the time. It's just that they're human being is such an amazing thing, and our culture and civilization is such an amazing thing that they carry on as zombies. They're like zombies, but if you want to live, you have to be reborn again. You have to take the seed the seed that is going to create something new in you. And if that is not happening, there is no life in you. So it's a question of, you either have life or you don't, or you have death. And that's a moral question. If somebody chooses, death over life, that's a moral question. And you're doing exactly the same thing to you as you're doing to other people. You're basically inflicting death on them. Or if you're living, then you're offering them an invitation to life. So it's not about other people, primarily about you. It's just life and death. So it is a moral issue, and it's as important as life and death.
So a question that I have. So how do you decide what seeds are going to take a root that you're going to nurture within yourself?
Okay, that's a beautiful, beautiful question. Okay. Now what we have studied is that we have studied Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, the Gospel of John. We have studied Louis Sullivan. So let me use one of those people, or many of those people. Tao Te Ching says, keep going back to the root. So you have to go back to the Tao. Tao is the seed. So you have to go back to the root principle. Louis Sullivan says, form follows function. So you have to go back to the function. Don't be attached to the forms, even if you have made them. And when you made them, they were the greatest thing in the world. Doesn't matter. And most people actually are impressed by forms that other people have created. And they are letting themselves be ruled by forms created by other people. Some people are, but whether it is from you or by any, it is form as first. When that is there, there is depth. So you have to go back to the function. Again, function in this case is a universal function. So it is a function that, that can fall into any fertile soil, and it will create different things, but it will just create different things. So it's a particular kind of seed. It's a universal principle. I mean, in Gospel of John, it is very simple. It's the seed, everything combined together.
So can you give an example of a function?
Let's take these ones. So thou would be one. In the Gospel of John, it would say, the Christ is the seed. So you take the seed. So you basically use the ideal, the greatest possible ideal that you know of, that is universal, that is applicable at all times, all people. That is a true seed, because it is a seed from which everything comes. Now, this is not a modern way of thinking. This is a very much of a scribal way of thinking, which was prevalent from about 500 BC to about 1080 or so, let's say 580, that time period. So this is the idea from that time period, whether it is the Tao, whether it is the Brahma and Atma in Bhagavad Gita, or the idea of Christ in the Bible, or the idea of function, where Louis Sullivan is influenced by transcendentalism, which is influenced by kind of Indian philosophy and core of the New Testament as well. So it's a way of kind of focusing on only, like Louis Sullivan says, I realize that it's only that I should focus only on the universal ideas, because they are the ones with maximum power. And the beauty of that is that they will go into all kinds of different fertile soils to produce all this myriad variety of forms from it. I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I kind of, one of the books that I read not too long ago, or listened to twice, was Autobiography of a Yogi, which I thought was a very, very powerful book. And there's just, much more expansive ways of viewing things that is not typical and common. And it's a little bit seeing how people, where they go, not literally, but figuratively, when they kind of are connected with their higher power, their higher self, their spirit, whatever. It's pretty mind-blowing.
Absolutely. That's a great example, because that is from the Indian tradition. That is from the Indian tradition. So you can have, I was talking to a friend and he recommended, Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It is the same principle. It's saying, look, this is not something, a special thing. This is not something that you do over. It is there in you right now. And you can focus on it right now. Moment you focus on that ideal, moment you are aware of the Tao and start flowing like the Tao, moment you are aware of functions that are operating in you and around you, in that moment itself, the transformation happens, because you are dying to the forms and focusing on the function. You're giving up the old man and bringing the new man into existence. That is the free will. That is the power of will. That is the that is this sacredness or sanctity of the present moment, which is
this much deeper place. I think when you quiet the mind and you settle into a deeper universal space, the things show up, or there's more effortless transformation that can occur.
Exactly. And it astonishes you, because what happens is that the chatter or your attention focused on the periphery, on other people, what other people will think.
Yeah.
Those are all kind of distracting you from where your attention needs to be. And moment you let go of those, let that chatter quieten, your attention is focused on what it should be focused on. And that is a tremendously creative and tremendously powerful experience. It is experienced as an aesthetic experience. We read Owen Barfield, and he says that, beauty or poetry at its best will cause a felt transformation of consciousness. So it is that aha moment, which is at once is a aesthetic experience, epistemological experience, metaphysical experience, ethical experience, and it is experienced in the present. And what it does is that it actually melts the problem away, because most of the problems that we have are actually not problems. These are like figments of our imagination. They're kind of holding, it's like you're holding on to things. Like, okay, you brought up the Indian context. So let me give you my favorite example from Naneshwar, who is one of the greatest commentators on Bhagavad Gita. He says, our condition is like a parrot. We have actual wings, okay? And we are sitting on a branch, holding on to the branch, and a gust of wind comes by and you get turned upside down, okay? Now you're looking down and you're saying, oh my God, if I let go of this, I'm going to fall down and die. So you hold on to the branch for dear life, and you forget that you have wings and the sky is yours. And you're just attached to what you have. And that is the condition that most of us are in most of the time. It's all about letting go.
Thank you for sharing all that.
You're welcome. Mike.
Oh boy, so much. I think one of the takeaway tonight was the concept of struggle, Shrikant, that I think if you have a Taoist mindset, it's almost like you're dancing with struggle. Struggle exists, and I think that is a universal element to contend with. If you're trying to get good at something, if you're raising children, if you're starting a business, struggle becomes a dancing partner at all times. And it's a question is, are you going to flow and dance with it, or are you going to try to punch it? If you try to punch it, you're going to hurt yourself. And I think if you try to deny that it exists, you're going to delude yourself. So the question is, how are you going to dance with struggle? And what some people said today, Mona, who I really, really enjoy, you know who I'm talking about, Shrikant? She's
Absolutely.
a mathematician and a teacher. I really enjoy her comments. She opened the takeaway earlier by saying she's experiencing a renaissance, and she's learning everything. If you all remember, she was the first to give her. It wasn't a takeaway; it was her initial comment. And basically, what happened is she's learning all these different things now, and she's still struggling. But she's dancing with the struggle because she kept using the word joy. I'm playing, I'm learning, I'm playing, it's joy. So even though technically she's struggling, right? She's learning all these different things. To her, it's not a struggle anymore because she's aligned with the struggle. The struggle is there regardless, right? If you're going to improve, it means you're going to do something that you can't currently do. The distance between this hand and this hand is struggle. To get here, you have to struggle. Correct. So how are you going to get there? You're going to dance your way up, or you're going to punch it, and that's what I took away from what Mona had said. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, but
Nancy, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I think you're talking, I think it's kind of east versus west in terms of the perspective and
It's,
responsiveness.
yeah, yes,
That's what kind of
yes,
jumps out at me is kind of
yes,
kind of the two opposing views, and one is kind of free falling, and in a way, I don't know, it's hard, I can't express it in elegant way, but it's kind of surrendering, letting go, being an open vessel to kind of,
yes. But-
see what kind of where you're being led and guided versus kind of making something happen and pushing through it. And those are two opposing parts of myself, because there's that, still that part that, I gotta, kind of gets into that. I've got to push forward and kind of crack the whip a little bit on myself. And then there's the other part that I'm starting to tap into more, which is kind of letting go, quieting the mind, and kind of letting this more of an organic process kind of reveal itself and unfold in a way. So I think they're almost different paradigms of.
May I say something, Mike?
Oh, please, of course.
Okay. So Nancy, you put it really, really beautifully. But I don't think it's West versus East. Actually, it is the old, ancient versus modern. Like what we call West is modern West. If you go further back, when you look at the Stoics or when you look at the New Testament, it is not like that. It is actually very similar to the Eastern approach, because like the Stoic approach, right, or the Eastern approach is to kind of accept that nature is what it is, or God is what it is, and you just say yes to nature and let that kind of sink in. It's like that humility in face of the infinite, and you start with that. And once you start with that, it is the question of, it is captured best in the serenity prayer. Give me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change. And that comes first before anything else. And then courage to change the things you can. But it's like, until you let yourself kind of accept it, another way of looking at it is that it is humility of basically, it is humility and ambition together, if you will. It is by saying yes to nature, you're trying to do your best. And even while doing your best, you realize that that is not the ultimate best that you can do. So be open to, again, listening to nature in face of whatever you've done, to kind of keep doing this loop over and over again, so that you become more thou-like, more, you let that flow through you. But it starts with the acceptance. The modern times and the interesting thing is that people who actually founded the modern times were not like that. So for example, it really starts with Newton. Like Newton figured out how everything is put together. So everybody said, now we know how everything is put together. Now all we have to do is now we can transform the entire world. We have the power to do that. It's just a question of how and all of this. And we certainly have the capacity of doing that. So let's do that. Okay. So now it is kind of, let's do this kind of a thing, right? Which is quintessential kind of Western approach that Nancy was talking about. But when you hear Newton himself, at the end of his life, after having achieved everything, he says, I do not know how others may see me, but as to myself, I seem to have been but a boy playing on the seashore, who found a shell more prettier than others, while the entire ocean of truth remains undiscovered. See, this is exactly the humility and ambition together. He worked very, 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 very hard, in order to discover the truth. But this is his approach to that. So this is like the best of the the ancient and modern combined. We have let go of the ancient. We have let go of the Tao. We have let go of the universal in us. We have let go of our soul. And we have chosen to focus on things. We have chosen to focus on reactions of each other instead of going back, because it requires this, as Nancy was saying, just kind of letting go and saying, what is it? What is it? What is it? And letting your mind quiet until you try to go towards it.
I think, it's quieting the mind in this day and age is, it's not a practice that, it's something that we've never has been a big part of our culture and society here, to kind of go inward and kind of just be open to, get into a meditative state. And I feel like there's this vast ocean that is part of that whole experience. And, I'm just scratching the surface of something so much more extensive and than, I'll ever get to understand. But to just kind of tap into where some spiritual beings have taken that in their lives is, like there's multiple Christ-like beings walking around who have this spiritual depth that's surpasses what I could ever have imagined. This is based on, again, there's so much more to explore, but this is really thinking about autobiography of a yogi. And these are people who were not on Instagram and, they were showcasing, not writing books and doing a publicity tour. They were, hidden in some Himalayan cave where, living, meditating 8 hours a day, and someone happens, every 10 years, someone might knock on their door. So, and to learn about some of these people out there that I believe truly existed and it's fascinating. It's just absolutely fascinating for me to read about that. But yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we've done here on 52 Living Ideas, which has been really transformative for me personally and for many of our folks here, is we did this parallel study of Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, and the Gospel of John. Because if you look at these scriptures, all of this is there in the scriptures. I mean, yes, there are people like, the autobiography of a yogi, but actually, if you try to commune with the scriptures yourself, okay, not in a reactive way, but truly try to commune. For me, like the New Testament is very new. So because I did not read the Bible until about 1.5 years ago. And what I'm finding is I'm having exactly the same experience that Nancy is describing, that every day I focus on it, I see new things, lot of new things. Same if I were to read Tao Te Ching, it's the same thing. If I was to read Bhagavad Gita, it's the same thing. The text itself has actually captured enormous richness. And there are many, 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 many ways of interpreting, so that each individual can only interpret some things. So kind of keeping on going back to the text, and everybody who has gone back to text. So, just reading, like, for example, I'm studying the early church fathers right now. So people like Origen, Athanasius, Irenaeus, people like that. And they are the first ones to actually grapple with it. So they have this fresh kind of, and the church structure hasn't come about yet. So these are just people out there in the wilderness, just trying their best. And they actually form the core of what the church doctrine becomes. But its church doctrine is necessarily kind of simplified and kind of in order to fit into something, but these people are not constrained by that. And you learn so much from looking at many such people.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you keep going back to the text and keep going back to especially early commentators.
And I'm sure a lot of commonalities, similarities, rather than focusing on, one tribe versus the other, we're just focusing on feeling like there's so many differences. I mean,
Exactly. And other thing that happens is that you start seeing commonalities between not just Old Testament and New Testament, but you see commonalities between the New Testament and Bhagavad Gita.
yeah, yeah.
And between the Tao, and you start to triangulate these things, and you say, oh, the idea like Tao is there everywhere, of something that is universal, running through everything that you're seeing, as well as yourself, as well as people, as well as the interaction.
So this is the function that you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And each of these great minds, commune with this in their own way, and they express it. And being open to that, and being kind of having a discussion like this about that with anybody who wants to discuss, it's profoundly transformative. And I like this, this conversation format is very, very powerful, because what we're doing is each of us is just putting forth whatever we understand, whatever our experience is, and we learn whatever we can from each other,
Yeah.
But I have become a big fan of kind of going back to these original texts, because there is just so much wisdom there. What has happened is that the thing that distinguishes them is that they are integrative works. They bring together the individual and the social. They bring together thoughts, emotions, and actions and intuitions, all in an integrated whole. And they just take that for granted and they're talking to other people who are also like that. So they just take all of that for granted. So it is a way of looking at ourselves which is very different from the modern times. I think in modern times, I don't want to be too harsh, but most people think of themselves as things and other people as things. It's like it's a thing-based culture, instead, like Buckminster Fuller says, I'm a verb, God is a verb. It's action, it's the function. And we've forgotten the function. We are just enamored by the forms.
So
And then,
how do you have a question in your group? Do people read the same thing and then talk about it? Or
oh
is
yeah,
it
yeah.
more, so you're all kind of reading the same thing
Yeah,
together?
we do the same. I mean, we did about 100 meetups on Dao De Jing. So what would happen with the typical format? I'll give you the example of Dao De Jing, because Mike also loves Dao De Jing. So what we did was that we would take a verse. Everybody would study the verse using whatever translations. We would start off by everybody reciting their favorite translation. So there would be like 12 to 15 different readings, sometimes in multiple languages. And then we had Jason and Amon who are translating Dao De Jing just for our group. So they would and explain to us character by character what their understanding of the text was. And then we would have an open back and forth discussion. So it's very deep dive. I mean, we did the same thing. We did about 100 meetups on Bhagavad Gita, I think about 70 meetups on Gospel of John. So it is, there is no other, what shall I say? This is an issue of seeing a different sensibility, different way of being, different way of functioning. Now that is like your operating system. Changing an operating system is not an easy thing. It can't be done just by one thing. So we have done, all these three put together. all these put together, it's about 300 meetups, about 2.5, let's say 2 hours each, 600 hours of videos on the YouTube channel, with about, on an average, 30 people each participating. So 600 into 30, so 6,000, 60,000 hours of individual people hours engaging with this material and trying to see connections between them.
And how long has this group been around, your group?
We started with I had a group in New York that I used to run in person. I would get between 60 to 80 people showing up every Saturday. And with COVID, I didn't want to lose this great community that we had built. So I went online. And so since COVID started, we have done about, I think, close to 1,700 meetups total on various topics. So it's been around since COVID, this Zoom format. And people show up, like Mike showed up, and I talked to him and I said, hey, Mike, I'm planning to do a meetup on art of learning by myself, and I don't really know that very well. It looks like you are both into chess and martial arts. And do you know this? He says, oh, I'm like a little Josh.
Yeah. A watered down version.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was true. Yeah.
And just the next time I met him, we were doing meetups together. So meetup on art of learning together. So
that was great. Hey, Shrikant, I went to the Museum of the Bible. I was in DC visiting a relative. If you're ever down in Washington and you go to the mall, the Museum of the Bible is fascinating.
Okay.
Fascinating. Boy, oh boy, did they do a great job.
Well, thank you for the recommendation. I will go.
Worth the trip.
Yes. Julie had something. Julie, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that as far as learning something new at this late age, this platform is, because it's interactive and educational, is like better than a college class, better than any book I've read. It is so brilliant to help find what my view is and also learn new things. So practical.
Thank you, Julie. I agree. I mean, I think this is, the thing is that this is a flat. I think everybody can, it's not like one person trying to tell you this and you have to worry about, are you in consonance with them? Am I going to get the right grade? Everybody is trying to commune with the text itself.
And what a civilized way to show our example of how the world should be, where we respect each other and celebrate our differences versus look at any political thing. It's just beautiful.
Thank you, Julie. The other thing I would say is that if you look at lives of great people like Leonardo da Vinci, as they grow older, actually their curiosity and their ability and their rate of learning keeps going up. Okay, it just keeps accelerating. So, life done right, it has to, you start with it as a child, you have certain ability to learn. You can see curiosity in kids. Why is it that adults should have less curiosity? They should have more curiosity. And that's what, people like Leonardo are like, and all great people are like. So, education is wasted on the young. So this is, it's
so true.
You should be able to do more with this. All right. Back to you.
Thank you, Shrikant. Thank you for, let's wrap it up. Thank you all for sticking it out too. It was like we had a separate meetup, which was just absolutely terrific. Great to see you again, Shrikant. I don't see you enough. Alicia, thank you. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Oh, so fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We do it, I do it for 52 Living Ideas the first Wednesday of every month. But they have, as Shrikant mentioned, you can go to the website and just see what's available on YouTube, and you'd be amazed at you're bound to find books or things that you were interested in the past that they've done quite a deep dive on. So I highly recommend you check out the website. And then, become members there. You can see the meetups that are coming up, and when you're free, you can join us. So thank you all very much. And I had a great time. I learned a ton. So thanks again.
Thanks, Mike, for letting me stop by.
Oh, yeah, it was great. Thank you, Shrikant. Always appreciate it. Good night, everyone.
Good night.